Hi, Year 12. I know we're going to be potentially seeing the same lesson live. Okay, this is my intention, is to do a recorded version and the live version, which just means that you have a second point of reference. Or if you can't make one, you've got access to the other. So you started without me, like in our non-live lessons. Okay, working and beginning to think about question 4, which is introducing us to a whole new way of thinking and writing, because we're positioning ourselves to think and write an opinion article. Now, this is like Marmite. You will either love this task or hate it, because you will either find yourself that you think and can write naturally in a seemingly creative way, or it will be your nemesis. You'll always overthink the creative element and therefore talk yourself out of being able to do it. So as you've seen from the lessons, we're really breaking this down into a very structured, almost quite technical, creative process. I just want to remind us, though, as we move on through the creative elements, though, that if you look down here, we haven't planned yet how this article achieves the 20 marks for theories and concepts. Actually, so far, we focused our attention on the AO5, the creative elements, and they are only worth 10 marks. So actually, in terms of percentages or in terms of weighting, your knowledge of your theories and concepts is actually going to get you more marks, a higher weighted response, than how creative you can be. Okay, so we do know that we have started this journey, and the process we've established is using different activities each lesson so far to help you adopt the style and form of an article, and to adopt that kind of journalistic aspect. Okay, we haven't really looked yet at how we adopt a particular perspective on how we adapt knowledge of theories and concepts to the non-specialist audience, or the needs of a non-specialist audience. And we haven't yet adapted what we think. So we're really hanging out at number 1, adopting the style and form of an article. Okay, the other elements actually pick up in terms of speed and practice, because we already know knowledge and theory. Okay, we've got to just change what we know a little bit. And actually, when we do the adopting a perspective, it comes into number 4. Those two are really linked, because then you begin to adapt what you think in response to ideas and issues. So we know we've looked at the element of a peg. So for AO5, the creativity, we've looked at this aspect of what pegs are. We've introduced the title itself of the article we're going to be writing, that we are working towards an outcome of a feature article about the attitudes towards the way people speak. And we have really been camping out at the stylistic kind of opening, establishing a strong headline, the stand first, the byline, and the idea of an opening paragraph that establishes the peg is what we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so just as a starter, I do apologize, the screen actually does look really busy, doesn't it? But we've been working in the process of transformation. So it says over here, transformation. Now, this was the stand first, okay, of a new article we've introduced. We did a bit of analytical work on this last week. Despite attempts to stamp it out at school and in the workplace, my dialect is alive, kicking and bloody gorgeous. Now, this is a teacher, so my attempt at transformation. Despite attempts to teach it out of me or appraise it into submission, my dialect has strong roots and is blooming lovely. So that's my transformation. That's my creative bit. The bit I want you to think about it is this blue task here, okay? So what is the extended metaphor I've introduced? So in the red transformation, I'm going to ask you to pause in a minute and give yourself, about a minute, 2 minutes to do this activity. What's the extended metaphor being introduced? What is the idea concept being represented in that metaphor? And what imaginative idea is it linked to? And can you include word class labels? In other words, how do we break a metaphor down into its constituent parts? What are from a word class point of view, from a linguistic point of view, the elements of a metaphor? So just press pause, zoom in on the red example. Okay, what is the idea? What is the extended metaphor that I'm introducing? Think about its word classes. Think about what's the idea being represented and what's the imaginative idea it's being linked to. Okay, guys, did you get it? So it's actually coming in this kind of final main clause. My my dialect has strong roots and is blooming lovely. Now look at it. What is the idea, the concept being represented? So within all metaphors and similes, actually within all figurative language, there's always what we call, if we wanted to be mathematical, the X and the Y. The X actually has a technical name. We call it the tenor. The X is the idea, the concept that's being represented. The Y is what we call the vehicle. Now, this is the imaginative idea it's being linked to. And then what happens within the imagination of the reader is both elements will share certain characteristics. And it's those shared characteristics that create the imaginative eureka moment, like, aha, I get it. So if we look then, my dialect has strong roots and is blooming lovely. Now, from a word class point of view, my dialect there is the common noun. My is the possessive determiner. My dialect. Then we've got the verb has strong roots. So actually, I said a main clause. I went too quick, didn't I? This is a compound clause structure. So my dialect has strong roots. So we've got the verb has. Then we've got this other noun being introduced, roots. We've got the pre-modifying attributive adjective strong. So my dialect has strong roots. And, so our coordinating conjunction is, so another verb, blooming lovely. And is blooming lovely. So actually in that blooming lovely, from a word class perspective, it's a predicative adjective, lovely, with that lovely blooming, so a pre-modifier, so it's two adjectives working together, blooming lovely. So actually that's the word class part. So how's that working as a metaphor? So what's the idea? What's the tenor? I'm actually really trying to talk about my dialect, aren't I? But the imaginative idea that I'm starting to embed or plant, see, a little play on words there, is the idea of something that's got roots. Now, roots is the vehicle, and then that links to the extended metaphor. Which word links to roots? Did you see it? Blooming. So there's a chance here that I'm introducing a potential extended metaphor that likens speech to a plant or to a flower. A flower has roots and it blooms. So I've got a metaphor there where the tenor, the original idea is my dialect, and the vehicle, the descriptive idea, is a plant, okay, is a flower. And that's coming through the use of roots and blooming, okay? So it's a natural metaphor. It's an organic metaphor. It's a metaphor that is positively representing my dialect as something natural, something that's a part of me, something that is beautiful. Okay, now I'm going to just see another example. Okay, but this isn't just about metaphor in this one. Okay, so here was another stand first. Elocution lessons are back in vogue, with many people seeking to disguise their regional accents. But shouldn't we be beyond that now? That was the original one from the original article. This is my transformation. Elocution lessons are back in fashion, with many people looking to make over their regional accents. But haven't we learned that changing such things are only skin deep? So if we look at this transform stand first, what elements am I changing here? Can you identify and label the word classes that I've changed? In how in doing so, I've introduced a new metaphor. If you want, you can begin to use the new terms we're introducing today. We could talk about the tenor. So what's the idea in concept? What's the vehicle? What's the imaginative idea? And what's the shared characteristics between my idea and my imagination? Okay, so press pause. With any metaphor analysis, just start from word classes, and those word classes will then begin to help you unpack what element is the tenor, what element is the vehicle, the imaginative idea. Okay, so I'm just going to let you pause. I would say, again, give yourself about 3-4 minutes and we'll come back together. Okay, so elocution lessons are back in. So I've transformed vogue to fashion. I'm back in fashion. Now, actually, vogue and fashion are really part of the same semantic field. When we talk about vogue, it does link to the world of fashion. So I've just made a transformation here to fashion, and elocution lessons are back in fashion. So we've got that choice of noun, fashion, with many people looking to make over their regional accents. So what element have I transformed there? Well, in the original, it used the verb to disguise. Here I've used the verb to make over. Now that is linking to my extended metaphor of fashion. People have a fashion makeover. I'm thinking Gokwan. I'm thinking, is it Rylan? He does a transformation, a makeover program. Okay, so we could talk about the verb phrase to make over. But haven't we learned that changing such things are only skin deep? Okay, so we know, or you might know, that was an assumption, that this idea of skin deep, would you recognize that as being part of a semantic field to do with fashion? And we talk about looks being skin deep. Okay, so only skin deep. So we've got those elements. So we've got the metaphor, the extended metaphor there, because it's coming through in 3 different ways to do with fashion and makeovers. So the shared characteristic is that there is a popular notion that changing your accent is just like having a makeover. It's just like changing clothes. But actually we know, but haven't we learned that changing such things are only skin deep? That really there's a suggestion that accent change is superficial. It doesn't really have anything to do with our character, our content. It's all about the externals. So that's what we are going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at the idea of establishing a peg and using metaphors to achieve that, and some anecdotal and writing if we get there. So we're going to have a bit of fun. Now, I say fun because I actually genuinely mean it. I enjoy this part. Now, we're going to be looking really within this article at unpacking and having our own perspective, our own point of view in relationship to accents and speech and the attitudes towards accents and speech. So one of the things I want us to start thinking about is actually, where am I putting myself in this debate? Am I somebody who is a champion that accents in all their beautiful diversity should be accepted, that there should be no discrimination, that there should be no unfair treatment of people based on the way they speak? Or am I somebody who actually recognizes that in certain circumstances, teaching somebody to use standard English is perfectly feasible, that it has benefits? Am I somebody that is a staunch advocate for RP, that there should be no accents? We should wipe out all variation in speech other than the prestigious one. So as we use these metaphors, you can begin to adapt some of your word choices. Some might use positive or negative connotations based on actually whether you think we want to say accents are good or accents are bad. Now, you need to get yourself set up on a page. We want tenor, vehicle and ground. Off you go. Okay, guys, so what we're going to see over the next couple of slides are some what I would call transferable metaphors. So although I'm going to illustrate how we adapt the vehicle, the imaginative idea to the tenor of accents and speech, really when we see other topics come up, some of these are transferable. So I'm just going to, because I need to do some typing, just make my screen a bit smaller so we can put in some ideas on this side of the screen. Now, each image starts to introduce the imaginative idea, the vehicle, that we can start to apply to accents and speech. Okay, so if we look at picture number 1, I'm pointing at the screen. You can't see that, can you? I'll do this instead, like I'll do a little circle around it. Okay, what do you think that picture might represent? What can you see there? Yes, so we're going to look at the idea of a courtroom. We're going to create an extended metaphor of a courtroom. So I'm just going to ask you some quick fire questions. So in a courtroom, where does the person stand who's on trial? They are in the dock. Okay. Now, what do we call somebody that's we can put in the word trial. Now, what I'm starting to do here is using that image as a starting point. I'm going to create under the subheading of ground, almost like a semantic feel, words or phrases inspired by the vehicle of a courtroom. Okay. Now, I'm going to give myself a minute. So you can't see it, but I've got a little timer on my screen and I'm going to come up with as many words or phrases to do with a courtroom. So on my marks, get set, go. So courtroom, dock, trial, judge, defense. I'm trying to overthink the spelling. Defense, prosecution, witness, guilty, innocent, evidence, judge. We've got the judge. Oh, jury. Okay, conviction, sentence. Okay, any other words? Now, what we're doing in this process, I'm now getting obsessed with the spelling, I should have changed that at the end, is I'm literally downloading from my own imagination, from my own knowledge, all those terrible TV shows we maybe watch, criminal justice, things like that. I'm creating a semantic field linked to the idea of courtroom. In a minute, we're going to translate it and see what elements could be useful for talking about accents and dialects. So I've got, okay, so courtroom, doc, trial, judge, defense, prosecution, witness, guilty, conviction, innocence, sentence, punishment, or release. Oh, and that's my minute up. So then, okay, so that's my ground. So far, I've got my semantic bang. Now, I need to start asking myself, do any of these apply to some of the ideas and issues we've encountered looking at accents and speech? So we can actually say that this actually is a nice, what we call a transferable metaphor. I've started with the easiest one. Okay, so actually, accents and speech are on trial. People are judging different accents and speech. Okay, they're on trial. So we could say accents in the dock. Accents on trial. Now, I'm just going across now, and I'm just starting to use some of my words from my word bank, and I'm just starting to see if I can adapt them to the idea of accents. So accents in the dock, accents on trial. So what is the now defense and prosecution? So in a trial we have two sides. Okay, we have the defense is defending the thing or the person that's on trial. So if accents are in the dock, if accents are on trial, okay, so we've got the defense. Now the defense, what would the defender say? So if we were defending accents, if we were saying that any accent, any way a person speaks is good and right, what language would you use? What defense would we make? So the defense may argue that all accents, now all of these ideas are coming from the articles we've looked at. Now, I'm older, I've seen these articles before, so I'm holding more in my head. If you need to, when we start kind of going through this process and you start applying it to your own writing, you can obviously refer back. So the defense may argue, so coming through both the BBC Work Life article and the angry tone of shut your face, is that actually all accents are valid. All accents are equal. They're actually in defense of accents. I like that. That could be a headline. Why do both the BBC article and the article from the Telegraph then argue that all accents are valid? Because they say that we should be a source of pride of where you are from. And therefore we can defend accents as being a source of pride of where you are from. They signify who you are. Okay, now if we were looking at the other side of them, then what are the prosecution? Now the prosecution is against accents then. So we're taking this extended metaphor, we're starting to think metaphorically, and the prosecution might argue that actually all accents aren't equal. So if I'm the prosecutor, what accent am I actually championing? All accents aren't equal. RP is the beneficial, is the privileged, I prefer the word privileged, the privileged, powerful accent that we should all use. Now, I'm just going to pause there. So what I've done is I've started to use, can you see, the black writing is meant to denote I've used the image to generate a bank of words or phrases linked to that metaphorical idea. Then I've begun to see, does that work for the ideas, the issues that we've seen in accents and speech? Now, we could say that there's been, if you think, it always makes me really sad actually, when you see like those cases of people that were wrongfully imprisoned or wrongfully convicted. So actually we could go back up here and we could say accents have been wrongfully convicted of a crime. Yeah, for too long accents have been aligned with a wrong idea about social class and background. Now, I know I've suddenly used that wrong twice, but look what I'm beginning to do. I'm beginning to create a new stand first. Accents have been wrongfully convicted of a crime. For too long, accents have been aligned with a wrong idea about social class and background. And then I can create my headline, okay? So we could say accents and speech in the dock, or accents and speech on trial. Now I've created a completely unique to me headline that is absolutely then linked to a stand first, and then I could potentially take that little bit and make it my opening paragraph, all of which have my extended metaphor. This is why this is the bit I love. This is the bit we make room for today because it's fun. Yes, it is. This makes me happy. But we also see then the potential for kind of like wordplay, changing, adapting. Now, the reason we spend so much time doing this sort of thing in class is that actually, as I said, each of these metaphors is really the ones I've chosen for us to look at today is transferable. Some will have more ground in them, more words, more semantic sets, more ideas than others, but all of them in some way can be used and reused with a few twists and tweaks to all of the topics we cover. So we're going to spend time doing this process today and enjoying it. So we're going to have a look at, let me think. So I'm just going to save that only because we might want to come back to that in a minute. Just going to do a quick, I hadn't thought of it this way. So I'm just going to copy that so then we can look at the next one together. Now, again, the way our brains work are unique and wonderful things. And my brain has all the benefits of the fact that I am really old and I watch too much TV. I've read too many books. So for me, my brain works quite metaphorically, quite imaginatively. I've held a lot in there. So we're going to go to this one. Now, there is a reason I've chosen this one, and I will disclose that in a minute. I don't want to get us thinking too far in the way I want us to think. So remember the first bit that we do. So we establish a word bank inspired by the image. Okay, so we start with, what is this? What can we see? Say what we see. It's a web. Okay, now when you're starting to do this and you're doing your word bank, think in terms of nouns, adjectives, metaphors. So what does a web do? So a web is spun, a web ensnares. What do webs do? A web it's a trap, but it is unique. A web is natural. A web is sticky. So remember, we give ourselves a minute and we come up with a web. So then we could think in terms of bigger ones like cobwebs. So sticky, cobwebs, unique, natural. It can ensnare. It can be used to, well, spiders, it's used in a very, very predatory way. That's why I've got that word ensnares there. It traps animals. Okay. It can be hard to get out of. Okay, so as you see, sometimes you'll get more ground out of one of these images than others. And sometimes the information you might get, fast forward as well to when you're doing your coursework with Miss Lockett and you have to create your own articles. An investment in your metaphor, doing a little bit of research into it, what can I find out about webs, okay, is not a wasted metaphor. So the reason I wanted to do this one is for two, it has a double value. We come on to, with both myself and Mrs. Lockett, a theorist called Jean Aitchison, who is really kind of fundamental. She hasn't yet come into social diversity, which is why we haven't seen her. But she writes an incredibly kind of seminal article that has a huge impact on language, ideas about language, not just for teachers and A-levels, but kind of like universally. And she talks about attitudes towards language change, and she herself uses the metaphor of a web. So the reason I wanted to use a web today is that sometimes when we look outside of this kind of like, today we're very particularly looking at a question form, but when we look outside of it and we're reading articles in class, we're looking at other theorists, they might use metaphors that we can intertextually magpie. Also, why I like the web is the web can be used both positively and negatively. So again, depending on the perspective we choose to adopt, we could use a metaphor. And actually, we could have done the same with the doc. So if we think about the negative, first of all, because I am somebody that believes accents in speech are a sign of individuality, that we should champion variety, that it is dangerous territory to, see, I could have done a metaphor on territory, but anyway, it is dangerous territory to make people feel that their accents are wrong, to criminalize, back up to vehicle judging, to criminalize, to demonize the way people speak. I don't agree with it. I accept that in some cases we will have to adapt the way we speak to improve our intelligibility so that people understand us, but not at the expense of compromising who we are. That's me in a nutshell. So for me, when you see these attitudes that say accents are wrong, when you see a continued voice, very loud, very public, that says there is a right way to speak and a wrong way to speak, I think that's a web. It's kind of like a tangled up set of ideas that have got confused and trap people and trap us into a particular way of thinking. So I might say that attitudes towards speech are a tangled web of wrong ideas that trap us into thinking that some accents and ways of speaking are better than others. So I've begun to create my writing in response to my metaphor. Okay, so a web, it's spun, it says, now we could say that each web is unique. Each web creates kind of like it's hard to get out of. So we recognize that breaking this pattern of thought can be tricky. So we could say breaking these patterns, because actually a web has patterns, these patterns of thinking can be hard. Like a small fly trying to escape the sticky web. And actually, what do we know about webs? How does a fly get out? Well, it doesn't unless somebody breaks the web. So breaking these patterns of thinking can be hard, like a small fly trying to escape the sticky web. It often takes another to break the web and free the thought. So I've actually gone straight, I've bypassed straight from like too much thinking into beginning to write. This is the creative stuff, okay? This is the bit I love, okay? And this is the Marmite bit. We will either love it or hate it, but this is why it's coming after the very structured transformation. This is being more creative. So we could go through the web metaphor. Now, okay, so I'm just going to put that there just for a minute, because then we can do a couple more. So I'm just going to do the elements that are, if you like, the black, the mustn't pause, mustn't hesitate. Now, if we're doing this, or if you're watching this after you've done the live lesson, you will see that these ideas might not be exactly the same as we get in the live lesson, because I'm going to be using the ideas you give me. But what we want is, we want the 1 minute of just download. What does this image metaphorically represent? What does it make us think? All the words and phrases. And then can I begin to just transform it into a kind of opening sentence, a stand first, that introduces that extended metaphor. Now, what do you think this image is? Okay, it's an eye. What do you think the cross suggests? So this is an image all to do with sight, perception, in particular blindness. Now, guys, can you remember, and I know you can because you're wonderful, in Christmas Carol, what is the state, the abstract idea that is represented often by things like the fog and Scrooge's blindness? It's a state of ignorance. Brilliant. So with sight and perception, there's often blindness, there's ignorance, there is so now we're going to just think of words or phrases to do with sight. So we've got clarity, we've got double vision, We've got objects in the rearview mirror may appear close in the eyes. I'm trying to think of some of the problems when people come to their site. So we've got double vision. We've got 20 vision, which is the perfect vision if you want to go into the services. We've got double vision. We've got clarity. We've got blindness. We've got, what's that disease when people can't see? We've got a cataract. We've got glasses. We've got to have an eye test. We've got to go to an optician. We've got to I always remember as well, when else did I have to test my eyesight when I was learning to drive? I had to be able to see. Long-sighted, short-sighted. Okay, so that's me, boom, getting some words. Now, how do I start to see if this metaphor will work with attitudes towards speech? Now, I'm always going to be giving you my perspective, which is, remember, I think diversity of accents is what I would celebrate and champion. There's a part of me that concedes and accepts that in certain circumstances, adopting or modifying the way we speak in order to be understood can be beneficial. That's the only reason to change, in order to be better understood by people. But actually, I think that there is a danger in crossing the line where we pressurize people into changing and we criminalize the way they speak. We make them feel that the way of speaking is dumb. Okay, so that's the perspective. So let's have a look then. So for me, okay, people have been blinded. Okay, people have been blind to the truth. People have been blinded to the idea that there is a right way to speak. People have adopted an ignorant, blind position that says RP is the best way to speak and any other type of speech will go against you. I think people have been short-sighted. They haven't had the 2020 vision that fully understands and sees the way we speak is to be celebrated. People are walking around with cloudy cataracts in their eyes when it comes to accent and speech. It's time for clarity. It's time to dispel ignorance. It's time to test the way we see people, and if necessary, change our lenses. Our lenses, so that we judge people in the right way. Okay, now, do you know what this creature is? Can you tell me? Now, you'll see there is a second page of this, and I don't know how long in real life this will take. So we're going to do this one together. I know from the recording, though, we're coming up to probably with the other tasks that we've done, probably coming close to our hour. So I don't want to give you too much to do. So I'm going to talk you through this one, and then we might have a look at just what the images are, and I'll set you off for your between now and next lesson to look at those images and come up with your elements. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. Do you know what this fella is? Little clue, it can change its appearance in order to fit in with its environment. Good. We've got a chameleon. Now, why a chameleon? Because I wanted to give us the idea, or introduce the idea that chameleon. Why can I not spell chameleon? Ah, there you go. Nope. Hey, it's a CH at the beginning. There you go. A chameleon. Now, what is a chameleon? A chameleon is a creature, an animal that adapts its skin and outward appearance in order to blend into its environment. Okay, so why guys? Talk to me about evolution. Talk to me about Darwin. So it's an evolutionary development. It's why is he changing his skin? He doesn't want to get eaten. It's protective. Okay, it guards against being eaten. It's a natural defense. Okay, so for each of these, because when you're looking at the ones in the next thing, give yourself a minute to kind of like brainstorm words or phrases to do with the picture. Now, if we're looking at this, okay, we could say, if we wanted to do that, actually changing your speech and accent, get over it, it's fine, just go for it. So we could start with using an extended metaphor. Changing your speech and accent is an evolutionary development. In modern society, we have to acknowledge that it is time to change. Like the chameleon, an animal that adapts its skin and outward appearance in order to blend into its environment, people should be encouraged or taught how to adapt their speech in order to blend in at work, in order to get ahead. Just as the chameleon is able to defend itself and guard itself against being eaten as a natural defense, by changing our accents, people can guard themselves against being held back at work, not being fully understood, and not being judged appropriately. So I could go down the positive route. I could do all that and then I could do this. But guys, people are not chameleons. And although we like to use an evolutionary model in certain areas of human life, this is one of those moments where I would say no. A chameleon has a natural defense because it's small and vulnerable to being attacked. If we're saying that people with accents are small and vulnerable to being attacked, it's not their job to defend themselves. It's society's job to change to protect them. It's time to say that actually all accents are valid. So you can then begin to use the extended metaphor. Now, I know that there are other animals as well that have this. What's the one that changes its spots? The leopard never changes its spots. So we know that in the natural world, actually, we will find lots of examples of animals that have adaptations in order to survive, in order to blend into environments, the color of lions, etc. So we could take it a bit further. But the point we want to make is, that if we're saying people need to adapt in order to survive, in order to avoid being eaten or taken off by predators in a work environment, in society, then we're getting closer to animals than we should be. Yeah, we're becoming more uncivilized rather than civilized. So you can make that lovely argument. So guys, these are the ones I want you to have a think about. So I'm just going to give you a few clues. Okay, and we will come back to them tomorrow. So this is meant to be sickness, illness. So when you're thinking about the ground, create a word bank to do with sickness, illness, but it also can be the other side. How do we cure sickness? So there's a cure, there's a prescription, there's illness, there's sickness. Okay, now this one's meant to be a bit like we saw earlier, a planting metaphor. So we could talk about soil, growth, weeds, roots, feeding, tending, gardening, pruning, weeding. We could get lots of words in that one. Now this one, can you see who he is? He's got a thunderbolt. Yeah, it's Zeus. Now I would like you to think though he's meant to represent myth. So if I said to you myth and mythology, what are the words that begin to kind of populate in your head? And this little fella is meant to be a disguise. So when you're thinking about the words here, so disguise, hiding, dressing up, changing your appearance, going undercover, it could be any words linked to that. So what I'd like you to have fun doing just for the end by yourself today is for those four. Now, I don't want you yet to do the red, which is where we adapt it to the tenor of accents and speech. I just want you to create 4 banks for those new 4 images of the words and phrases. And when we come back next lesson, we'll look at some of those banks of ideas and how we adapt them. So like I said, this is the fun bit for me. I love this bit. Enjoy it. You can Google, you can use dictionary.com, thesauruses.com to get words linked to sickness. If you said, anyway, so that's what you're going to do, okay? So if you are live with me and then watching this again, this might just give you a chance to back up and get some notes. Obviously, when we're doing it live, it might look slightly differently because we might get different groups of words. Okay, but see you next lesson.